All right, we are all set. So I believe you saw the announcement I posted. We will have the midterm exam on Thursday, 14th of March at 6:30 in the law school. Okay? Okay. So we saw last time about the fixed exchange rates. We discussed how the central bank will achieve fixed exchange rates, what are the consequences for monetary policy. What were the consequences for monetary policy, by the way, with fixed exchange rates? What did we say about monetary policy?
So you can't use monetary policy.
You can't use monetary policy, right? Because monetary policy will be tied to achieving the fundamental value for the exchange rate. So that's what we said. We then saw that fiscal policy would be more effective than with floating rates. And why would that be? Why with fixed exchange rates, fiscal policy would be more effective at increasing the output?
Due to monetary accommodation.
Due to monetary accommodation, which is in turn due to
So whenever there is an increase in ICM curve, the output increase, people will try to invest more. So demand for money increases. In order to maintain that demand, the shift ICM curve also shifts for.
but where does this need come from for the LM curve to shift? Why does not happen with floating exchange rates? Why it happens only with fixed exchange rates?
In floating exchange rate, what happens is when we increase the output, the demand for money also increases. So at the same time, nominal exchange rate also changes. That's why it not happens with in case of
Why does the nominal exchange rate change? There is one thing that is more steering the whole thing and you are not naming it. What is it that is pushing up the nominal exchange rate with floating rates?
interest rate?
Yes, the interest rate is going up with floating exchange rates. But with fixed rates, we cannot afford to have the interest rate go up, because that would exactly pull up also the exchange rate. But the exchange rate is fixed, so it cannot go up. Hence, also the interest rate cannot go up. Therefore, central bank needs to increase money supply to ensure that the interest rate remains the same. Okay, so that is why fiscal policy is more effective with fixed rates. Then we saw the relation between exchange rates and interest rates, which was driven by which logic? What is the logic behind? Why is it that exchange rates and interest rates are not moving independently, but they are tied in a relationship in general? I mean, with fixed rates, interest rate and exchange rate must be equal, otherwise must be not equal, must be, exchange rates are constant because it's fixed. Interest rate must also be constant, otherwise it will not work, as we saw. So this is under fixed rates. In general, even if they are not tied this much, they are still tied in a relationship. Why is that? Why do interest rates do not move? So what is the logic behind this conclusion that they cannot move independently. Yes?
So when interest rates change, the demand for the currency also changes, and so the exchange rates change. So if the interest rates change, that will cause.
No, but why they change in a way that is well described in a particular relationship that we saw, which says that the domestic interest rate must be equal to the foreign interest rate. Remember? Plus or minus any change in the exchange rate. So where is that coming from? What is the logic behind? Yes?
So sir, when I'm evaluating investing money abroad, first I have to look at how much conversion rate is there, and then what will be the expected conversion rate of when I get my return. And so according to that, we formed the equation that it has to deal with the interest rate and the exchange.
Okay, so we are basically assuming that the returns from investing across countries
Are equal.
have to be equal. Because if they are not, then people will profit from the differences. So this is called no arbitrage condition. There should not be any opportunity for arbitrage. Okay. So, by the way, since we are here, can anyone provide a piece of paper and then you sign on it? You circulate and sign with today's date. Thank you. Okay, so that's what we saw. Now, moving on, all that we saw applied to the case of a large open economy, where the word large means that the economy will not be, the financial markets particularly in that economy, will not be affected by what happens overseas, in the way that what we are going to see today will. Okay, so today we will change our focus. We will look at a small open economy and see what is different in that. So there is a famous model in international macro, which is called Mundell-Fleming model, which studies this case of the small open economy. This is the model we will study today. We will see the policies, fiscal, monetary, and trade policies in this case, both with floating exchange rates and fixed exchange rates. Okay? So, that is what I want to do. Now, the first key assumption that you should really, drill in your mind about this small open economy is an extreme case, which Mundell entertains, thinking that it would be useful for theoretical reasons, but also because it gives a theoretical framework of analysis. So the extreme case is that we are looking at a small open economy because this is a small economy, and second bit, there is perfect capital mobility, which means that the moment there is any differential in returns from investing here or outside, all capitals will instantly move wherever it is more profitable. Perfect capital mobility. All capitals will instantly move. This is an extreme case. So the result of this assumption, this is a very important assumption, small with perfect capital mobility. As a result, we cannot have anything but the equality between domestic interest rates and foreign interest rates. Because the moment these are different, with the perfect capital mobility, or capital will instantly leave or, flood us if it's the other way. So that the two interest rates will be equal at all times. They have to be equal at all times. This is the key difference between this case of the small economy and the case of a large economy. So we can no longer think of the interest rate as an endogenous variable determined by domestic market conditions. Now the interest rate is determined at the international level. Okay? That's the big story. So now we want to derive some graphs that describe this economy under this new assumption. Now these graphs that you will see, they are called again IS-LM curves. They are a bit confusing because it's still called IS, but if you see there is a star reminding you that it's different. It is different, but my experience is that students will confuse this a lot with the standard IS-LM curves. They are very different, so please pay attention. And I have yet to see a class where nobody makes this mistake. There's invariably somebody who is mistaking the two cases. So let's see what's going on. This is the equilibrium condition in the goods market, right? Output equal to consumption plus investment plus G plus net export. Consumption is, of course, a function of disposable income. Net exports is a function of the exchange rate. Investment is a function of the interest rate, negative function of the interest rate. However, the interest rate is no longer endogenous, it's now fixed at R star. Right? The interest rate is fixed at R star. So now, the two variables we are playing with to derive our IS curve are no longer Y and R, because R is fixed, it's Y and E. These are the two variables we play with. Not I and R, but Y and E. So when you talk about the IS curve in the Mundell-Fleming model, it's not a relationship between output and interest rate. It's a relationship between output and the exchange rate. Very important. Okay? Now, it's the nominal exchange rate. However, this is a short-run analysis in the Mundell-Fleming model where prices are fixed in the short run. So nominal or real doesn't make a difference. Okay, so how do we derive the IS curve? Let's derive it through the Keynesian cross. Okay, so here we have the relationship negative between, remember how we derived it with the closed economy with the Keynesian cross? We put here the investment function, the negative relation between investment and interest rate. Here we have the negative relation between net exports and exchange rate. Okay? Now, so this is the negative relation. Now, when the exchange rate goes up, because the relationship is negative, net exports will decrease, right? So when net exports decrease, since net exports are a component of planned expenditures will shift down. So following an increase in exchange rates, we have a shift down of planned expenditures and therefore equilibrium output goes down. Increase in exchange rate, lower equilibrium output. So first we start with E1 with the given level of net exports given planned expenditure, given equilibrium output. E1, Y1, we get one dot. Then we move to E2, higher exchange rate, lower net exports, shifts down, lower output Y2, second dot, E2, Y2. Draw a line to connect, that's our new IS curve. Notice the difference. This I should have, put in a different color to make you notice. That is not the interest rate anymore. It's the exchange rate. Okay, we still call this IS star, but now it's between, so whenever you hear the word small open economy, it should immediately bring to your mind this graph with the exchange rate on the vertical axis. Okay? Okay. So this will be the relationship, right? Okay. Now we have derived the IS curve. And the intuition for the negative slope is that whenever the exchange rate goes down, for example, net exports will go up, so that will push output upwards. Okay, now let's derive the new LM curve on the financial map. Okay, so we start with, now for a moment, ignore this graph, focus on this graph here. This graph is basically if you ignore this flat line, it's the graph you're familiar with. Interest rate, output, LM curve. That's the one you know. It's coming from money demand and money supply, right? Okay. However, so that will give you the pairs of interest rates and output where the financial markets are in equilibrium, money supply is equal to money demand. However, we know here that the interest rate is not endogenous, but it's fixed at the world interest rate level. So it's equal to this horizontal line. No matter what output is equal to, interest rate is R star, right? What does that mean? Given the LM curve, that fixing the interest rate pins down one particular level of income. And so when we want to draw that in the EY graph, because we need to use it together with the new IS curve, that will mean that regardless of the exchange rate, there is only one level of income which will work, which is given by the LM curve crossing the world interest rate. So it will be a vertical line. The new LM curve is a vertical line. Why is the LM curve a vertical line when interest rate is fixed? One step back. Why was the LM curve upward sloping before? The upward sloping LM curve meant that if you have higher output, to keep equilibrium in the money markets, you need to have also higher interest rate. So what was the reason for that? Why with higher output you need higher interest rate?
So the money supply and the money demand are in equilibrium?
Because with higher output, you would have higher money demand. Hence, for a given level of money supply, which is constant, we need a higher interest rate so that the effect, negative effect of a higher interest rate, which remember is the opportunity cost of holding money, will offset the positive effect of higher income. Now that interest rate is fixed, can we have higher income? What would happen if income were to go higher? Money demand would increase, but we would not have any offsetting mechanism to bring it back for a given level of money supply. So, for a given interest rate, there is only one level of income that ensures the equilibrium in the money market. Any other level of income will make money demand even too large or too small for the existing money supply. This is why when you have a worldwide interest rate, it pins down one unique level of income. This is a very important point. If you follow this, the reason why it cannot be any other than it is unique. Is that clear? Understood? Or do you want me to repeat? Repeat. Okay. So, is it clear why the LM curve is upward sloping? When income increases or decreases, money demand will also change. So for a given level of money supply, we need the interest rate to play an offsetting role and bring money demand back equal to money supply. Now, when the interest rate is fixed, that offsetting role is gone, right? So at that particular interest rate level, there will be only one level of income which equates money demand with money supply. If income were to be higher or lower, then money demand would become higher or lower, and therefore there will no longer be an equilibrium in the money market, because it will no longer be equal to money supply. Okay? So we have the new LM curve, again vertical with E here, not I. Put them together. So this is the LM curve, the equilibrium in the money markets, money supply equal to money demand, which is now a function of the world interest rate and output, and the new IS curve with a given equilibrium exchange rate. So the equilibrium exchange rate is determined by the interaction of these two, of the new IS curve and the new LM curve. Okay. Now we can study policies. So let's start with fiscal policy, then after the break we'll do the rest. So if we increase G, okay, expansionary fiscal policy, at every level of exchange rate, we will have higher income. So that is the familiar shift to the right of the IS curve. So if we increase G, IS curve shifts to the right. What is the new equilibrium? The new equilibrium, as you can see, output will not change. Exchange rate will be higher. So what does that mean? It means we increase G to stimulate the economy. Is the economy stimulated? No. Output is not changing. What is going on?
So the higher exchange rate is causing a decrease in net exports.
The higher exchange rate is causing a decrease in net exports. Not only that, the decrease in net exports is exactly equal to the increase in government expenditure. There is complete full crowding out. How do we know that? That it must be equal, that the decrease in net exports will have to be equal to the increase in G. Why is that?
So the consumption and investment isn't changing, so the only two variables left are G and X.
Exactly. That's very correct. But again, the reason is the fact that the interest rate is fixed. It's always that working in the background. That because the interest rate is fixed, there is no change in investment. And not only that, because the interest rate is fixed, there cannot be any change in income lest the equilibrium in the money markets be lost. Okay? Because if income were to go higher, we go back to that point, then money demand would increase, and for a given level of money supply, the equilibrium in the money market will be lost. So therefore, we cannot have an increase in income with expansionary fiscal policy. The only thing we will achieve is an appreciation of the exchange rate with a small open economy. Okay? Notice that the difference with the case of a closed economy and the case of a large open economy. In a closed economy, fiscal policy would crowd out investment through the interest rate. In a large open economy, it would crowd out both investment through the interest rate and net exports through the exchange rates. In a small open economy, it crowds out only net exports, but the crowding out is complete. There is no room for any change in output. Okay? All right. So this is about fiscal policy. So we have a short break, then we continue with the remaining policies. Monetary policy under fixed exchange, floating exchange rates. Okay, so obviously, suppose we have an increase in money supply. In this case, the LM curve would shift right. But can the LM curve be allowed to shift right? What would happen? The exchange rate? No, we are still with floating, sorry, I thought we were already with fixed. So we are still with floating rates. So yes, money supply will increase, so the LM curve will shift right. Due to this, the exchange rate will fall, right? We will see later with fixed rates that that's not possible, so money supply has to shift back. But in this case, we have floating rates, so the exchange rate falls. And therefore, output can increase now. Okay? The increase in output is through the increase in net exports due to the fall in the exchange rate. Now, why is output able to increase in this case? Is allowed to increase, unlike before. Why?
So because international interest rates are changing?
No, that's not changing.
So but then how are we? But then how can we change the LM curve?
It's not it's the money supply that is changing. The money supply is always in the hand of the central bank, so that is changing. So the money supply changes, and because of that, we can have, actually, we need to have higher output so that money demand can also increase and match the increase in money supply. Okay? So in this graph here, think of it as a shift of the LM curve to the right. You still have the horizontal, this one, but now the unique income will be higher. Okay? So this is with an increase in money supply. Therefore, we will have it's the next one. We will have drop in exchange rates and increase in output. Okay? So next we consider, okay, let's first see this, what is the difference between this case of a small open economy and the closed economy case. So there the chain was through the interest rate. Higher money supply, lower interest rate, higher investment, higher output. Here is through the exchange rate. Higher money supply, lower exchange rate, higher output, higher net exports, higher output. And notice that a large open economy is in between these two polar cases. So in the large open economy, you have both an increase in interest rate, a drop in interest rate and an increase in investment, but not as much as in the closed economy. And you also have the drop in exchange rate and an increase in net exports, but not as much as in a small economy. So the large open economy is in between. Yes?
Why are the effects here not as great as in the economies?
In the case of why this is not as much, because with a large economy, since the interest rate is also changing, then output does not need to increase as much, because the decrease in interest rate is matching money demand with money supply anyway. So with lower interest rate, we will have higher money demand. And therefore, we don't need as large an increase in output to match the increase in money supply. You have a given increase in money supply, then part of it is matched through an increase in output, and part of it is matched through a decrease in interest rate. That's for the large open economy. Okay, so finally we look at the case of trade policy. Trade policy means applying restrictions to trade, like a tariff or quota. Okay? Now, in case of a tariff or quota, which will reduce imports, okay, the reduction in imports means higher net exports. You know what Trump is doing these days? He's trying to reduce imports from China, apply tariffs, in the hope to see net exports increase. Now let's see if what he thinks will happen will actually happen, according to economic theory. Higher net exports, highest curve goes up. It goes to the right. Exchange rate increases. What happens? Exports will fall. So will net exports change in the end? No. The decrease in imports will be matched by an equal decrease in exports. So in the end, we'll have no change in net exports or output, and we will have less overall trade, with a loss in terms of the gains from trade will be less. So that is what this policy of applying tariff or quota will achieve under a floating exchange rate regime. It will not achieve the hope for increase in output, increase in net exports, because it will only transfer, there will be transfer across sectors. Instead of now having exporting firms, those exporting firms will have trouble because with a higher exchange rate they will find it more difficult to export. But the firms targeting the domestic market will have an easier time because people will not be importing anymore from overseas, so they will be focusing on the domestic stuff. So there will be no change overall, but there will be less overall trade. Okay, higher exchange rate, no change in output, and fewer gains from trade. Okay. Also, since there will be these shifts across sectors, the unemployment rate may increase because people have to move from one sector to another. Firms that were exporting, they may have to fire people, and firms focusing on the domestic market may want to hire people. While this happens, there will be additional frictional unemployment. Now let's move to the fixed exchange rate situation and see what happens in this case. So with fixed exchange rate, the central bank will stand ready to buy or sell currency to match any excess demand or supply of the currency, right? So what happens with fiscal policy? IS curve shifts to the right. Now the exchange rate is fixed, which means that the central bank has to accommodate by increasing money supply. Okay? Because it cannot allow the exchange rate to change. You know, why would the exchange rate change with an expansionary fiscal policy if the central bank was not intervening with higher money supply?
Because money demand will rise, or demand for other currencies will rise.
Because again, when going back to the previous case, if the LM curve is not shifting, when the IS curve shifts, you will notice that if the LM curve is not shifting, the goods markets will be in equilibrium, but the financial markets are no longer in equilibrium at that exchange rate. So the exchange rate has to go up. And as it does that, then net exports will start falling. So we will move along here and we'll reach here. But now that will not happen. We are with fixed exchange rates. So the central bank will increase money supply so that the exchange rate can increase, can stay the same. So fiscal policy will be effective here. It will increase output. Just like for the large open economy, remember? We saw that it was effective because there was no crowding out. Here too, it will be effective because there will be no crowding out from the net exports effect. Okay, those crowding out channels are shut down in case of fixed exchange rates. So in this case, fiscal policy works. Now what about monetary policy? Obviously, monetary policy cannot work here because the exchange rate is fixed. So the central bank has to keep money supply wherever is necessary to keep the money market in equilibrium. If it increases the money supply, the LM curve would shift, and then the exchange rate would change. So therefore, there is no room for monetary policy in fixed exchange rates, whether the economy be large or small. That does not change. What about trade policy, applying a quota or tariff? So we saw before that Trump would not achieve anything under flexible rates other than a reduction in trade flows. What about under fixed rates? If exchange rate were fixed, would this policy achieve anything? It will stimulate the economy, it will increase output, because now there will not be any offsetting effect of a decrease in exports, since the exchange rate is not changing. However, what can we say about this increase in output? Is it a gain from the overall, world economy or not? That increase in output is because of the increase in net exports due to the decrease in imports because of the tariff. So you put a tariff, imports will go down. What is going on? This increase is at the expense of the foreign economy. Your output is going up because the foreign economy output is going down. There is no net gain. You are gaining at the expense of the other, in this case. You will say, but Trump will not worry about losses in China. He will not be worried about that. But still, it should be kept in mind that the gain is not an overall gain. It's our gain at the expense of somebody else, in this case. Okay? So the demand will merely shift from foreign to domestic goods. Okay, so this table summarizes what we have seen so far. Floating rates, fixed rates, fiscal expansion, monetary expansion, import restriction. So we can see that with floating rates, fiscal policy does not work, monetary expansion does, import restriction does not. In fixed rates, fiscal policy works, and import restriction works too, but at the expense of the foreign country. Monetary policy cannot be used. Okay? So, if you are, an economic advisor in some consultancy, you may want to have these tables well there in front of you at all times, so that when people come and ask for what to do, you can quickly, decide what to advise. Now, one thing I want to point out, which is important, is that we said, due to this assumption of perfect capital mobility, domestic rates interest rates will be equal to foreign interest rates. Otherwise, all capitals will move either out of the country if the foreign rate is higher, or the foreign capital will flood our country if it's lower. So it has to be equal. Is it possible for the domestic rate to be different from the foreign rate, even with the assumption of perfect capital mobility? Is that possible? The answer is, it will be possible if there is some specific risk, country risk, attached to that particular country, even if it's small. So because of that country risk, investors will require, for example, a higher interest rate to wanting to invest there. So in that case, you cannot have equal rates, because with equal rates, people will not, so if your rate is a bit higher, people will still not come to you, because they will feel you are riskier. Imagine a country which is plagued by terror, terrorist acts. Which country that may be, I leave to your imagination. A country plagued by terrorist acts. Then investors will require a premium to invest in that country. So in that case, but generally this is not, it could be political turmoil, but it's also to do with risk of default, for example. If there is a risk that that country is not paying back, then also you need a higher interest rate. For example, in Greece is a small economy, but it was on the verge of default. So even if there is no terror in Greece, still people want a higher interest rate to invest there because they feel that their money may be lost. They may not get it back. Okay? And also it could be if there are expected rate changes, in case that happens, then investors will demand higher interest rate. So how can we model this? How can we accommodate this situation in the Mandel-Fleming model? We will say that the interest rate locally, domestically, is equal to the foreign rate plus some risk premium. Okay? Call it with the Greek letter theta, risk premium theta. Okay? So if that happens, the new equation in the goods market is that investment is now a function of the foreign rate plus this risk premium. So, and money demand is also a function of this foreign rate plus risk premium, because it's a function of the domestic interest rate, which is equal to the foreign rate plus the risk premium. Okay, so how will that change our ISLM curve? If the risk goes up, what will happen here? So if the risk goes up, remember that graph, we have Y and R. This is our LM curve. Then we have the R star. And then we have theta. So this is our where our LM curve is in case of a risk premium, right? What happens when the risk premium goes up? Suppose instead of this theta 1, we now have theta 2. So we have a higher output. So that means the LM curve shifted to the right. With a higher risk premium, that's the story with the IS curve. I didn't mention. I will mention now, but I was explaining the LM curve. The LM curve shifts to the right. Okay? Why does the IS curve shifts to the left? The IS curve shifts to the left because investment is a function of now R star plus theta. So when theta goes up, the cost of investing goes up, and therefore investment goes down. So IS curve shifts left. Okay? So what happens? Exchange rate will fall and output will increase. So this is a bit funny, you know. We are saying there is higher risk in the country. As a result of the higher risk, output is increasing. What's going on? Why? So why is the exchange rate falling? That's the intuitive bit, right? Why is the exchange rate falling? With higher risk, you know, people will run away. So the exchange rate will fall. But why is output increasing?
So net exports increase.
Because of the effect of this on net exports. With lower exchange rate, our goods will become more competitive and therefore output will increase. May increase. May increase. Why it may not increase? If the central bank is not happy with the depreciation in the exchange rate, it may prevent it by increasing money supply.
Reducing it.
By reducing money supply, sorry. And therefore, in that case, of course, if you do not have the depreciation, you do not have also the effect on net exports, so output is not increasing. Also, when exchange rate goes down, we said in the short run prices are fixed, but in the real world, when exchange rate goes down, there may be an increase in the price level because of the higher cost of imports. So in that case, with higher prices, you have a decrease in money supply. Same thing as here. So there is no increase in output. And the final reason why output may not increase is if consumers, since we are talking about higher risk, they may respond by holding more money. And therefore, in this case, the LM curve would shift leftwards, not rightwards. Okay? So in all these cases. So therefore, in all these cases, output would not increase. Okay. There are a couple of slides explaining the differences between floating and fixed rates. You can read them. I want you now to take your smartphones out, because we can have that live quiz I was planning for and we couldn't in the beginning. We can have it now. Now that we are all very fresh and not tired. We are a bit tired, but we are warmed up, right? We have our mind going with respect to economics. So in that sense, it's easier. So that's the PIN code you need. Interestingly, there is no music, even if the volume is up. Normally there is a, some kind of tune going on. Yes?
The internet's really bad. The internet's really bad.
Is it bad?
Yes, I also
have your own thing? We all have that nowadays. How come somebody has? Who has their own internet here? Is that working? Are you able to do anything? It's working? So we can start? Who is still out? Why? Which internet are you using? Can you go to the Wi-Fi? Okay, use this one. And this is the password. Is it working now? 14, so it should be okay. 2, 3, 6, 9, 11, 15, 14. Oh, okay. But now are you? I took my phone images for you. Okay. So I'm starting. Short-run expansionary fiscal policy in the domestic economy will red expand output at home but not in the foreign economy. Blue expand output in the foreign economy but not at home. Yellow expand output both in the domestic and the foreign economy. Green expand output at home but it reduces it in the foreign economy. This is the short run. Okay. So the right answer was the yellow. It expands both in the domestic and the foreign economy because we have a drop in net exports, sorry, a drop in net exports at home, so we have an increase in net exports overseas, and therefore output is expanded also in the foreign economy. Okay? Increase in nominal money supply in the domestic economy. This is in flexible exchange rates. Flexible exchange rates. So red, it has no short run or long run effects on the exchange rate. Blue raises real exchange rate in short run and nominal exchange rate in long run. Yellow lowers both real and nominal exchange rate, both in short run and long run. And green lowers exchange rate in short run and nominal exchange rate in long run.
So it
So-
lowers the real exchange rate because of the J curve effect, right?
Sorry?
So in the short run, it lowers the real exchange rate because of the J curve effect.
In the short run, we have seen, no, not because of that. That was because to establish the direction of net export. In the short run, the increase in nominal money supply will lower the real exchange rate in the short run. But in the long run, it will lower the nominal exchange rate. Okay. Under fixed exchange rates now, if the official rate is above equilibrium for the central bank, there is gain of reserves due to excess demand of currency, red, loss of reserves due to excess demand of currency, blue, loss of reserves due to excess supply of currency, yellow, gain of reserves due to excess supply of currency, green. Teamwork. One thing I like about this live quiz is that people are much more, active. When I'm lecturing, you're just sitting like that. But... So yellow is the right one, right? This is an overvalued exchange rate, because, so there is an excess supply of the currency. We didn't see the ranking, but never mind. Expansionary fiscal policy stimulates the economy more strongly under flexible exchange rates because of crowding out. Now this is before what we did today, obviously, because I prepared this beforehand. So forget what we did today. This is for a large open economy, okay? So under flexible exchange rates because of crowding out, red. Under fixed exchange rate because blue. Under both fixed and flexible, there is no difference, yellow. And under fixed exchange rates, because there is no crowding out, green. Of course, we saw that under fixed exchange rates, the interest rate cannot change, otherwise that will change the exchange rate as well. Therefore, and since the interest rate is not changing, there is no crowding out. So green is the right one. If a country has an overvaluation problem, the best solution is to sell more of its currency in the foreign exchange market, red. Decrease the money supply, blue. Buy less of its currency in the foreign exchange markets, yellow. Increase the official rate, green. decrease the money supply, right? I'm glad that most of you got it right. Okay, why? Because with decreasing the money supply, you increase the fundamental value and bring it up to the official one. So that overvaluation problem goes away. Ranking. Last question. In the long run, a decrease in money supply will, red cause a fall in price and a rise in the real exchange rate. Blue cause a rise in price and a rise in the nominal exchange rate. Yellow cause a fall in price and a rise in the nominal exchange rate. Okay. The green cause a fall in price and a fall in the real exchange rate. Oops. Decreasing money supply, long run. So there is no change in the real exchange rate, no effect. So these two are out. So you got confused between these two. Decrease in money supply means a fall in prices, right? Because the Allen curve shifts left, so the economy goes below full employment, and this brings prices down. And through that decrease in prices, the nominal exchange rate goes up. So yellow is the right one. Okay, that was the last one. That's the winner. Not going to ask who that person is. Maybe I should. Who is that person? That guy. That guy over there is, you know. Anyway, so let me save the results so you can leave now, if you like. If you like, you can stay.